Welcome everybody to the Mobility Grid webinar. Guys, I'm pretty excited today. It's rare that you get to introduce something that is genuinely new, like a genuinely new way of analyzing space. And that is what we're going to be doing today with the National Mobility Grid. Traditionally, as GIS folks doing site selection, we're very familiar with looking at the residential areas through census block groups because that's how the census reports on. This flips us, and we're going to be looking at our best customer segments based on where they're actually shopping, which is ends up, that's where we end up putting retail anyways. So the next 30 minutes, we're going to show you the mobility grid. We're going to show you a few different use cases for it. And Andy's going to talk through how it is built. And then I want to share an offer with you guys at the end, and we'll do some Q&A. So I am actually joined by Andy, who is the inventor of the mobility grid. We've been working the past couple of months building it into the personalized segmentation. It's really special when you've paired these two things together. And I think it's going to reduce 20% of the amount of time that it typically takes in your site selection workflows. So Andy, I want to maybe shine a little light first on you. You and I did a podcast episode, but I think it's kind of special your background and how you came up with the idea for the mobility grid. So I know a lot of people on this webinar know you, but if you don't, Andy, can you just kind of give us a little bit of background on how you came up with this and discovered it?
Well, it all started back in grad school in the mid 80s when I was drawing maps by hand and I was no good. Yeah, I was just really bad. I was the worst cartographer ever. But desktop mapping came about and it made my life easier. I did better maps. I did them faster. And so when I went from there to Lowe's, I was constantly looking for a way to get at fact-based decisions in a rapid manner. And so as technology evolved, going from desktop demographic systems at Lowe's to GIS when I was at Centura Bank and I had customer data. And on the webinar, we talked about ATM data so we could start to see customer movement. And then to VF and learning about Alteryx and customer segmentation, specifically household segmentation. It just all kept building one thing on top of the other. And then we discovered mobile data. And all of a sudden, we could start looking at competitors, customers, and trade areas, and so on. And so we started using a grid overlay to do heat maps of malls. And it was a natural progression to go from, well, if we can do a mall, can we do a market? And then if we can do a market, can we do the whole country? And so it was just a going just scale upon scale, increasing computing and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a pursuit of getting to the answer faster and more reliably. And that's the history of the mobility grid.
What I so have appreciated by your career trajectory is that you've sort of dealt with the pains of doing the site selection in both Lowe's, where you're putting a physical location, VF Corporation, where you are placing merchandise in those locations.
Yeah.
And so I really feel like it's born out of the actual pain that folks feel on this webinar. Just a little bit about Spatial, if you've not heard of us before. We are a software platform that does customer segmentation and competitive insights specifically for retail brands. And now we have over 750 retailers and commercial real estate companies that use us to rank their top customer segments, reach them, either that's on a map or through social media, and then resonate with those folks. Okay, so I want to go through the agenda today. We'll talk about the problem that we are looking to solve here, the two technological shifts that have made this possible. There's a reason that we are coming to you now in 2025 and not a time before then. And we'll talk through how it works. Andy will walk you through that. I'll do a demo of the mobility grid, share an offer, and we'll do a Q&A. Okay. There is a technology, before I get into the problem, that I think is very analogous to the mobility grid, and it's called the Furuno Fish Finder. So we'll take us back to Japanese commercial fishing in the 1940s. Their methods for fishing were interesting. So they would use depth maps. So stick a plumb line down there, see how deep it is. They had all that mapped out. Visual observation for finding where is the best place to fish. So they would look at bubbles on the surface of the water or look at birds that would be diving down, and that would indicate to them that there's probably some fish there. They'd use local knowledge and they'd use trial and error to figure out where do they need to fish. Until the 1948, when the Furuno brothers found a piece of Navy sonar lying in a scrap pile from a World War II ship. So they were um, they worked with radios, and so they were able to reverse engineer it and come up with the first fishing sonar. And that fishing sonar had a massive impact on the commercial fishing industry. So 1950s, they were using maps that looked like this, and they harvested 3.3 million metric tons of fish in Japan on that year. And they kind of had a problem because their supply chain had been crushed by World War II and they were starved for protein. And by the time the Furuno Fish Finder was fully adopted in 1963, they doubled that to 6.7 million metric tons, and they captured that as 2.3% of national GDP, and it solved a huge protein problem for the country. And the reason is because they were so much faster at finding where the schools of fish were when they were active. And what kind of blows my mind about this is that the tools had not really changed for fishing. The actual fishing part, they had the same nets, the same boats, and the same rods, but they just got a whole lot faster at finding where the schools of fish were. So, what is the problem with retail site selection? Retailers typically analyze where people live because that's where the data is reported on, but people do not shop in their residential neighborhoods. They shop in retail nodes. And that is the beauty of the mobility grid. It gets you directly to the answer of where are the retail nodes where my best customers are shopping. So here's an example. So what we're looking at is Dutch Brothers Coffee's portfolio locations in the Nashville area. I've got CBGs highlighted that have their highest concentration of customer segments. This is geodemographic customer segments, but you could use income, whatever you're using to map this. And then you can see they've done a pretty good job of being near the residential neighborhoods where they shop. But the the map changes totally. You get an entirely different perspective when you are looking at the grids where their customers are actually shopping, not where they're living, but where they're shopping. So we can see that Dutch Brothers did a pretty good job of locating where in the retail nodes where they shop. But they also, and this is what I love about this map, it gets your eyes right to the open spots where there's a lot of opportunity. So here in Bellevue, here in Franklin, we see a lot of opportunity. Andy, I'm explaining this at a really high level. Would you kind of walk us through what we're looking at here?
Yeah, it's so this is the H3 grid system. It's resolution 8, which is about a third of a mile across. And so the way that the mobility grid is built is we take the individual pings that each has a lat long and a timestamp, and we can, force them into these grid cells or just allocate them to them. And so all of a sudden we know by hour how many devices are seen there. And what the beauty of working with Leiden is that now we can segment that visitation data by segmentation. And so if you know the top 10 segments that drive 50% of your business, now you can all of a sudden map them out, and see where they are when they leave the home. So I might have jumped the gun there, Leiden.
No, I jumped the gun. I'm trying to find
Uh,
the Q&A thing for everybody. Hey guys, if you want to ask questions while we're going through here, the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see like a more, I don't know if you see my screen, and then you can ask questions down there. Cool. And we'll leave those Q&A for the end. Sorry, I forgot to say that at the beginning. All right. What has made this possible? Two technological shifts that have made this and why we're doing this here in 2025. And Annie was kind of talking about this. Before, when we use psychographic segmentation systems, typically these are demographics grouped up with k-means, and people will take survey data and apply those surveys to see what might those people do. And in those surveys, it'll ask, have you been to Target in the past year? How frequently do you go to Target? That's good. And we've got good indicators on, okay, based on that survey, who is Target's top customer? The problem with that is there's no way that you can create a survey that someone will actually take that has the entire universe of retailers unless you have actual spend data. In the beginning of 2025, we connected the personalized segmentation with Affinity's credit card data. And so we have a distribution across over 2,000 different retailers. We have every single one of their customer segments. So now you can just type that in there. That's one of the beauties of the mobility grid is you just type in the whatever brand you want, and you're going to get the distribution of segments. And so the technological shift kind of comes with a mental shift of now not only can you use the top demos, you can also frame flip it to who are my top spenders and map that.
So one of the things that you're going to have to, when you're using the mobility grid, that you're going to have to wrap your head around as well as we don't use block groups. We don't use zip codes. And one thing, it's really about where are your best customers at different parts of the day. Yeah, some people remain at home, they work at home, or they're raising kids. But the problem with those block groups is they're big, or zip codes are really big, and they're hard to interpret thematically. And so, what we were looking for was a way to have a uniform geography uh, that anyone could interpret. So, with a block group, you might have one that's 5 times the size of another, and you're trying to interpret what does that really mean. But with the mobility grid, the hex grids, they're all the same size. And so if you see one grid cell illuminated much more brightly than another, it's real easy to make the leap to, hey, that's more important than the other one. And so the whole idea behind the hex grids is uh, let's find an easy way to interpret the data and get to the answer quickly. So I think you should take the measure part, Leiden.
Yeah. So the first step of this is there's 3 steps: measure, match, and map. So the measure is you identify the top segments by spending or by mobility data or by if they're following on social media. So we measure that across thousands of different retail brands, and we can rank that across segments.
Yeah. And so to match uh, Persona Live to the mobile data, it's kind of a two-part process. One, it's based on where people live. And so we need to understand how to match Persona Live to those devices. And some companies do it by block group. In this case, we did it using a resolution 10 hex grid that Leiden provided the top segment per resolution 10. And that's basically 1/50th the size of a resolution 8. And so once we have that segment applied to that device ID, well, then we can start aggregating by hour, by grid cell, what kind of visitation we see. So we go all the way from measuring which segments are important to placing them in every grid cell in the US by hour.
Okay, let's check it out. Let's do a demo of the mobility grid. So if you're familiar with the Persona Live platform, you got our 80 segments here. They're leveled up into 17 groups, real obvious names like ultra wealthy families. I'm not going to get as granular as into my R80 segments today. I'm just going to do this at the group level. Okay. All right. So if we want to understand, I'm going to use Crumbl cookies as our example. If we want to understand Crumbl cookies top customer segments, I can go to the Explore page, and Explore ranks all the top segments. So we can rank them by a few sources, by their credit card transactions, by their mobile device visits, or their social media following. In this case, with Crumbl cookies, I could do all three. I'm going to look at their credit card transactions here. So I'm going to type in Crumbl, and I'm going to get Crumbl cookies. And now I can see their distribution of sales using credit card data across Crumbl's national portfolio here. So 12% of all Crumbl's customers come from this. All right, click one of those segments here. Let me put this back here. All right, yeah, 12% of all Crumbl's revenues come from ultra wealthy families, and then upper suburban diverse families, and then ultra wealthy families. So those are the top three segments. And I can look at this a number of ways. I can look at it based on penetration, which is percent purchased, or their average yearly spend, or their frequency. But I think revenue share is going to be really relevant here. And I can also do this based on age ranges or income ranges. But for the purposes of this, we're going to do the persona life segments. And then the next step, so we got our measure. We've ranked our top segments here. Now we need to map those segments. There we go. So I just go down here to the bottom and I can hit map. And then when I hit map, you are going to see a very familiar visual when this pops up. So we're going to see CBGs where those folks are present in the Cincinnati area. Okay, so these are the CBGs that have the highest concentration of Crumbl cookies customers. So I can go up into these areas and click one of those CBGs. I don't know what happened to ultra wealthy families because that was one of the ones. So I want to add that there. I can go into those CBGs and I can check them out and I can see how many of those people live here. So here we have 614 households that are the exact segments that Crumbl cookies are looking for out of 649 total households. But this is where they live. I don't necessarily know where they are shopping. But if I wanted to understand that, I would just go over here, click the mobility grid, and I can see where are those customer segments shopping for Crumbl. All right. And I can see that right over here near Kenwood Mall, we've got a nice bright hex. I can click that and I can get the count of observed devices in there. So we've got 178,000 observed visits in this particular hex grid. 80,000 of those come from Crumbl's top three segments. And now we basically have an opportunity map for Crumbl. It's pretty cool when you actually look at their locations. They have locations in a number of the hex grids. In fact, they're right next to the hex grid that I was clicking right there. So, I mean, they did a really good job with that. But additionally, if we look down here in the south, we see a ton of opportunity for Crumbl here in the south. So down here in Independence, Kentucky, etc. Anything you're thinking that you want to share about this map, Andy?
Well, as it is displayed, we're including interstate locations, grid cells that touch interstates. And some folks aren't interested in interstate locations. And so if you click on show highways, deselect that, you can remove those grid cells from consideration and get a sense of where the more local traffic is. And, just because an area illuminates well doesn't necessarily mean it's a retail node, because you can't have an office park or something like that. And if you remember that the grid cell is, the mobility grid is built to show you where they are at different times of the day, it would make sense that an office park might show up. In this case, it is a retail area with a bunch of restaurants and so on. And one of the cool things that Lighten's team has done is that as you zoom into a grid cell, the opacity changes so you can actually read what's underneath. So my hat's off to you guys for doing that. So
Yeah, yeah, and I think Andy points out a really good point. Like you got to go in there and look at the grid cell, make sure it makes sense with the context of the retail that you're trying to put in here. In this case, I think it makes a lot of sense. You got a Starbucks. Grace Fellowship sounds like a church, and I feel like those people might want coffee and cookies after church. So I think that particular retail location looks good for them. But yeah, I mean the way that I picture this being used is there you go. The way I picture this being used is this is kind of like a first pass where you can go and use all your systems that you typically use, just like in the Furuno fish finder. Like they didn't change the fishing rods, they didn't change your nets. This doesn't change mobile data for you. This doesn't change ArcGIS for you. This doesn't change your predictive model. I do think it gets you to the answer really fast and provides a really nice map when you're talking to your executives, where you can say, hey, executive for Crumbl cookies, look, there's a spot down here. There's another spot in Independence, and I think there's about three other spots that we can use to fill out this market.
yeah, the other thing too is for outdoor advertising or digital marketing, using the grids to identify areas where your best customers are might help you with your strategy.
Cool. Okay, we're gonna do one more demo here. So this really caught my eye. So Dutch Brothers has no locations in Chicago, and they are opening their first location in Naperville very soon. It's actually already, I think the construction is almost finished with it. But I was reading the article, and this is what caught my eye. They are saying that they want to do their full rollout plans in Chicago to ultimately open up 35 stores by 2026. And that is as aggressive as I've ever seen a store rollout plan. So how could the mobility grid help Dutch Brothers identify where the locations where they should consider opening up? Okay, so we're going to use the mobility grid to do that. I'm going to go to Explore again. And I can I can type in Dutch Brothers, but I can also look at their competitors, that's like an industry first. Now, for the first time, you're able to see your competitors. So we can see Starbucks, we can see their distribution of sales. Wealthy suburban families, ultra wealthy families, upper suburban diverse families. Dutch Brothers, do they have a different customer segment? Yes, surprisingly. So wealthy suburban families, they share with Starbucks, but they have these, I would say, more blue collar and lower income segments. Young urban singles, you got blue collar suburbs, but you also have this Hispanic group, melting pot families that basically shows up nowhere for Starbucks, but is 9% of their revenue. Those people 2.5 times more likely to buy. Now, it's probably because Dutch Brothers is a lot on the West Coast, their distribution of sales, but they still over-index with that. So it's something to keep in mind where you can see the differences between you and your competitors or any like synergistic tenant. So let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and map this. I want to push it over. And I just did their top three segments. And we want to go to Chicago. All right. So we have a CBG map here in Chicago of Dutch Brothers segments. CBGs get particularly hard when you get those really urban and small census block groups. But if we want to tell a story with this, we can turn on that mobility grid and we can see the CBGs where those people are visiting. So obviously you're going to see downtown show up, and just because it's just such a popular location, you will get a distribution of your segments that are showing up in there. So we can see just a ton of visits here, and then 19% are Dutch Brothers ideal customer. But if we go out here, I mean, we just get this huge opportunity right here. And there's also some opportunity over here. And if you look at Naperville. So that's where they're opening up first. You can plot a little spot in here and we can look at the report around there. You can see their distribution of segments in that location. So I think they did a pretty good job at hitting that Naperville hex. And I thought this was interesting as well. There's a lot of Starbucks closings around this area. So I'm just going to visualize all the Starbucks that are closing. One of the Starbucks is closing right near that area. So hopefully Dutch Brothers also, this is just happenstance, lucky coincidence they'll be able to capture some of that traffic. Now, the last thing I wanted to look at for this opportunity map, if they're going to fill this out with 36 locations, that's quite a bit. How might they activate that Hispanic segment that probably no one is focusing on nearly as much? So we can just isolate that. So I'm just going to pull off our locations here. We can isolate that. So I'm going to pull these segments off, and I'm just want to look at that Hispanic segment that we know over indexes on buying from Dutch Brothers, and probably gets ignored to a certain extent. Oh, I hit young professionals. We don't want young professionals on that Hispanic segment. Okay, so we can see in these areas, these are the areas specifically where those Hispanics are shopping. So I think Dutch Brothers can activate on some of this information over here in Aurora, and Cicero, and they can really uniquely target the segments that their specific customer set is looking at. That's all I got there, Andy. Any thoughts on this map?
No, not specifically. Other than you've been showing the segmentation based on the credit card spend. And if you're a brand that has a lot of cash business, you may want to flip to the
Mobile
mobility
data.
mobile data segmentation. And what you'll see a lot of times are the same segments, but you may see one or two that pops a lot higher using the visitation data. And so when you're going through using this platform, uh, personally, I like to look at both just to make sure I'm not missing something. So
Cool. Just recapping this. So, feature one, new, you can rank your top segments for your brand. Before, this took like a week of data munging of your own data. You go to the IT department, you get all your customer files back, and then you map that to a geodemographic segmentation if you have one. Now we can do that instantly. Feature number two here, see the top segments for your competitors and their trends over time. Before that's possible and totally impossible, today we can do it instantly. Feature three, you can map your top segments across the United States. Before, you would have to take your geodemographic data file, fiddle with GIS, and eventually get it up there. Now you get an instant map going from who are my best segments, and you flip right into the map rather than having to click on those segments slowly. And then for here, you can reveal retail nodes where those folks are shopping. Before, I mean, honestly, you could theoretically export nodes and then map it, but this really was not possible before the mobility grid. And then five, this is kind of the qualitative one. You can show a story anybody can understand, just like we did with Crumbl cookies. There's a spot right here in Florence and Independence, Kentucky. That would be awesome opportunity for Crumbl cookies. Before, this is very hard, especially depending on who you're presenting this to. Now it's pretty instant where you can see and understand the map. So I want to do two case studies here before we get into the offer.
so Leiden asked me to talk about our first use of the mobility grid. And it was with Alan Taylor, who is now the VP of Real Estate and Development at Pollo Comparo, one of our clients. But at his previous company, it was during conversations with him where he said, man, I just want to know where my best customers are, which kind of was the last straw. And we said, okay, we've got to build this. And the very first meeting with him to show him what we had come up with was in his home market. And there was an area only a couple miles from his house that really lit up for the concept that he was working for at the time. And he had one of those aha moments, like he really believed that his knowledge of the market and his gut feel for the market would tell him where to go. But there was something in his backyard that he missed completely. And he actually laughed at himself out loud and said, well, that proves that. And so now, what he didn't want in print, but I'm going to quote him anyway. He said, I feel like I'm cheating when I use the mobility grid because I know exactly where to spend my time and where to not spend my time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've referred it to Andy as site selection for dummies, and I don't mean to be that demeaning to the mobility grid, but it's very easy to get you a 0 to 80 pretty quick. And if Alan's used, so the mobility grid is any indicator on how good their business is doing. I'm just looking at their trends, the credit card trends throughout the year. Versus their competitors, they're up like 38% year over year here in March, and they've take 2% market share nationally from these competitors. So they're doing pretty good. Also wanted to share a recent case study with one of the people. So we actually have had a cohort of 10 companies that have been using this in a beta form here for a while and have given us feedback. One of them was Chris Myers at NewQuest. He's been using personalized segmentation for years now. And he was able to use that to help EOS Fitness, which is originally an Arizona-based fitness gym, and he helped them move into the Houston market. They opened up 20 locations using the personalized segments. And over the 2 years, they went from 0 to 17% market share among their competitors in the Houston area. So I mean, that's as much as I've seen. That's like aloe yoga level growth. So it's props to Chris and his team. What's cool is like he can actually see the results of his work. He sees that market share going up. Okay, ultimately, this helps you know where to fish next before your competitors do. It takes 3 weeks of work and brings it down into 3 minutes, and you can share the story in one map. The way that I see people using this is it's like a check before you go into your typical site selection workflow so that you can only pick the top sites and then put it through the typical workflow. Go through your mobile data, look at the estimated of those visits of those sites, look if there's open locations, put it into your predictive model, put it into your ArcGIS. This is that first frame that you're looking at. Okay, thank you for everyone who stuck to the end. We got a special offer for you. So, first thing is 1 month of Persona Live, and this is only for the people that are on the live webinar. Sorry if you're watching the video afterward. First month of Persona Live, this is typically 1,500. We're giving this for the first month and 1 month of the mobility grid. The typical price for that is 1,500. 4 white glove strategy sessions. So I will work with you to implement this at the beginning of your site selection workflow and help you uncover any hidden opportunities for your brand. Fourth, the segment and brand sorters. So it's every single brand that we have in a huge Excel file. So you can go down there and get those long tail brands. And the price for all of this, it's over $10,000 in value, is only 1,500. So we're doing a pretty big discount for the release of this. The reason that Andy and I are doing this is because I know some of you, some percentage of you are going to absolutely love this and you are going to stick with it forever. I feel so confident in that. And if that wasn't enough, this is a money back guarantee. So if you don't like what you're seeing in the first month, we will give you your money back. So worst case scenario is you get all the data on your competitors, you look at trends over time, and you get the mobility grid, you identify your top sites. And if it doesn't work for you, you come out with the knowledge of that. So this offer is for either the first 10 people that take the offer or until the end of Q4. I know a lot of you folks are you got some money that you're saving for the end of Q4 that you're looking left over. So maybe this is something that you can try. Okay, how do you take advantage of this offer? You can email me, Leiden at Spatial.ai. All you have to do is say subject demo, or we're going to give you a recap email. Send me an email afterwards and just say demo. And then I'll set up a personalized demo with you, and you can consider whether you want to move forward with this and look a little bit deeper into it. So let's get into Q&A. I was looking at in the middle of the webinar how to get to the Q&A. If you hover down on Zoom, there's like a little thing that says more, and then it says Q&A. So go to that. It's kind of hard to find. Okay, so I'm gonna start asking some of the questions. Okay. One question is, how do you assign mobile devices to the personalized segments? I think you hit that before, Andy. Do you want to hit that again?
Well, yeah. So, you know, Leiden has provided me a file by the H3 grids, but at resolution 10. So a very small area. And what that file has is the dominant uh, personalized segment in that grid cell. And so we go through a process. We really didn't talk about this, where every month we take all the mobile data and determine where that device lives. You know, where we see it the most in a residential area. We then, yeah, if that lat long falls within that grid cell, then we attach that dominant segment. So that's how we do the assignments or appending of the mobile data. And before I forget, we do the reason we do it every month is, you know, 1 in 10 households moves every year, so you want to make sure you're keeping up with where that device is.
Okay, do any of these segments cross for like Claritas or I'll add another one on here, Experian. So is there a one match Claritas and
No,
Experian for
there.
ours? So yeah, I'll answer that. There isn't. Our segments are weighted differently. So they're using demographics to segment people. We're using 4 different sources. One is social media, 2 mobile data, 3 credit card data, 1 the demographic data. So ours has a little bit different weight applied. Are there segments that are very similar? Yeah, because sometimes people's transaction patterns look at it maps exactly to their demographic patterns. So if you're using one of those and you want to map, for Claritas, we have more of like a qualitative map. Just what are the demographics that look similar? We have a little bit more of a mathematical Sankey diagram for Experian, but it's not a perfect one-to-one. Okay, are the segments weighted by affinity sales, and how many of the segments are mapped? Okay, let me just answer that real quick so you can see that. So when I was mapping those segments, I took the just 3, but I could have taken more. Let me go to let's do Lululemon. That's because always top of my mind here. I'll show you the difference. So the question is that weighted to those people's affinity um, for it, or is it just looking at volume? I mapped based on volume here. So I just mapped on total sales. So I just hit map, got your top 10, and I do it by total sales. I understand that I mean those just might be there might be a lot of the people in those, and so you might have an index that's low. You can also do this based on index. So if I go to index, I want to hit index. Now I've just sorted it based off of affinity. So now we're looking at revenue share versus the population base. So minus my, it's our highest income segment. You can also map on that as well if you want. There is another way to look at this. I don't think anybody looks at it because I don't think it's possible, but I love this way of looking at it. You can change the population base to actually the total sales in active and athleisure. And so we can see where Lululemon sells versus the population base or the total sales base within athleisure. I got to refresh this here to do that. Um, but that's another way of mapping it. It's just total active and athleisure sales by segment versus Lululemon's active and athleisure sales by segment. Let me go to Lululemon, do that again. Okay, so I can change the base to active and athleisure. So we can see ultra wealthy families make up 15% of all active and athleisure spending. So you can get specific indexes that way. Is there a way for me to have the national mobility grid with persona for my company outside of the spatial AI platform? I mean, we can both kind of take a crack at that, Andy. But that was the question. Getting it out of the spatial AI platform.
As long as Leiden allows it, yes,
Yeah. So I mean, the
yes,
short of it is you would work with Andy to do
yeah,
that. It wouldn't be based on what I'm sharing with you today. This is only based on the
yeah,
platform. But it is available. So you would work
yeah.
with Andy about that.
But that whatever arrangement uh, that we would come to would include the license for the data, because you have to have a Persona Live license to have that attached.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that I would like to work with all the providers. I mean, we're probably currently working with all of them to get this outside of this platform and into their platforms. So if you're using some other mapping system, I would love to work with them to get it built in standard.
Yeah, put pressure on your providers.
Okay. I think that's all the questions that we have. Again, if you guys want to go ahead and see a demo of this offer, a personalized demo, email me, Leiden at Spatial AI, subject demo, or Jimmy is going to send out an email afterwards. Just reply to that email and say demo. Uh, this is available till the end of Q4 until we have 10 spots filled. Thank you, everyone, for joining this. I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you.